this works this time. There we go. We are live.
Hi guys.
Finally. Finally, we made it happen. So nothing can stop us. That's what we are, go-getters. We'll just wait a few minutes till we have a few more people who've joined us. But what a mission that was. Good to see it's working.
How's it going?
Good, good. I was like, I got all dressed up yesterday and then it didn't work. And I was like, oh man, I can't do anything with my being ready because I can't really go anywhere. So, it was either do we go to the grocery store or do we go to the pharmacy? What do you pick? So I ended up going for a walk. It was nice outside here in Chicago today.
Oh, good. I'm
And
glad to hear
you
that.
guys have pretty
It was
hot weather right
41
now.
degrees here. Yeah, super hot. So yeah, it's too hot to be taking walks, and if you're fasting, not the greatest thing.
Oh, that's the worst. Yeah. Okay, so what we can do is, it's lagging a little bit, but that's okay, as long as we have you. So maybe just we can start by talking a little bit about, what you do, where you live, and, just a little background information.
All right, for the ones that don't know, I live in
Oh, no. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay,
It's lagging
sorry
a little
about
bit.
that. Yeah, I can see you stopping and starting. So I work in as an educational assistant in the middle school years, so grades 6 through 8, and I support kids that have special educational needs or as well as English language learners. So that's what I do. Yeah, and I've been doing that for about 5, 6 years now.
Gotcha. And you, from what I'd heard from you, like Dubai and Dubai schools were like some of the first schools to respond to the COVID crisis. So could you just tell us a little bit about when and how the school reacted to the current coronavirus crisis?
Yep, so I would say from about middle of Feb, we weren't sure about the schools closing, but there was kind of like this talk of, okay, this seems to be a bit of a more of a serious situation than we had thought it would be. But at the same time, some of us were like, maybe they're overreacting a touch because we didn't get the seriousness of it. But as soon as it hit like the first week of March, we were told that there may be a chance that we may start looking into distance learning in the next few weeks, but it was just all talk, and it was literally it was spoken about, and I think they decided within the next 2 days that was the last week we were going into distance learning from that end of that first week of March. So we have been off school since then.
Wow. And can you tell, for those of us who don't have kids or are not doing distance learning, a little bit about what distance learning is and how it works?
So from here, I know it's very different in other countries. No one's ever done this before, apart from if you did, if you did your degrees online, that was the distance learning. But up until high school learning, I don't know of any distance learning programs such as these. But we have gone, what I know from Dubai, it was like, for our school, it was a regular schedule, just as it was at school. So you were attending exactly the same classes for exactly the periods that you were, which were, in our case, it was a 90-minute block, and you would have partly some of it live classes, and the rest of it would be, you know, you could have time to get on with your work. So it was literally being in school, but in your house. Obviously not having the same
Right.
interaction, but I think for us, again, from the school that we belong to, I belong to at least, we were a very technologically advanced school. So to be honest, I mean, nobody had ever anticipated something like this, but I found that we were probably one of the better prepared schools in this, where by all the elementary years, children were already had been provided an iPad of their own
Yeah.
for the past few years, and through middle, through high school, everyone has their laptops.
Yeah.
So from that angle, we were ready to go. We use a lot of Google Classroom. Yeah, we hadn't used any live programs as such, but that was in that week that we had talks about it. We had got onto it and tried to do as much of it, speak to some of our colleagues, ex-colleagues in Asia. Just want to check that we're there. You hear me okay,
It's working.
everyone?
Good.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
we had a lot of in Asia, in China, that had already started this distance learning. So they had given us a bit of a head start into what programs are really great programs for this. And we started off with Zoom before we moved to Google and Meet. So to be honest, I think in the circumstances, we've done a pretty good job. Dubai has
Yeah.
done a pretty good job. UAE has.
And you guys were on Zoom and you moved to Google Meets. Can you talk a little bit about what that change was? Was that just
Yes,
kind of
we
like
did.
troubleshooting that you guys were doing, trial and error?
We started off, to be honest, Zoom seemed like a great program. You know, it was very quick. You provide meeting IDs and a password. It was a link. It was very quick for everyone to get in. And they had, you know, it was visually very easy for a lot of the kids to get used to. Sorry, I'm just, it keeps stopping and starting. So I'm a bit, you know, can you hear me?
No, you
But
just
there
keep
were,
going. We can
so
hear
Zoom
you.
was,
I'll let you know if
so Zoom was working pretty good. And it was, I think, about probably about 2 weeks ago when safeguarding issues came up. We were recording every one-on-one conversation or any classes we were having. Every single class is recorded.
okay.
So when safeguarding issues came up, and there were some cases around the world where we had people come in, hackers, people come in from different places and come into classes or meetings,
Yeah.
we decided to stop and move to Google Meet, which isn't as great as Zoom, but to be honest, Google Meet has been trying to fix all those small little bits because a lot of people in education are using them now. But
Yeah.
it's, you know, it's great.
Yeah. And then you mentioned that you work with, you know, special needs kids or kids that need some extra attention. So how does online learning work for them? I can imagine that's a lot more difficult than kids, you know, who are used to being online and taking online courses and, you know, who don't have those special learning needs like your kids do.
So there are, to be honest, it's probably the most difficult for those kids because we give them a lot of leeway when it comes, and screen time hasn't been the greatest thing. You know, we try to get them away from the screens as much as we can. You know, we take lots of breaks in a normal school setting, right? We go for walks. There's different places, different resources we use. We've had to obviously switch completely. So a lot of the time, this is outside the class time that we've got to meet and make time to see them and give that one-on-one, where maybe I used to have a group of kids. It's not as easy to do that for them to be following literal instructions. You know, these are visual, a lot of them are visual kids. They need a lot of kind of off a screen, not the instructions like this is your assignment, click on this. It's actually the worst thing. So we've got to be looking for different ways that we can kind of interact with them, get them to do things different ways where they're not having to work on a screen. So it's probably been the hardest for a lot of these kids. And again, English language learners, They will thrive in
Right.
places where have many people speaking English, right? You're able to pick up a lot more.
Yeah.
And they're kind of stuck indoors now, and they only have very, very few limited access, right, to, shows and that, or speaking to teachers when they can
Yeah.
online. It's nowhere near the same.
Yeah.
But
And
we're
I
trying.
can imagine for their parents too, um, having to play that role that maybe teachers had to play before is a lot harder as well. But you have kids too that are distance learning. They're a little bit older, but how has it been for you managing, having kids who are doing distance learning and then actually being the teacher for distance learning students?
I'm very grateful that this is happening at a time when my kids are a little bit older, and I can kind of trust them to, be in their classes on time, and, taking care of things themselves. There are many, many back. You can hear me. Okay. So there's many teachers out there that have kids of their own and are having a really, really tough time. It feels like you're kind of at times working way over time, way over time, trying to,
Yeah, I'm
manage
sure.
for classes. But in my case, at least, if I'm talking from my point of view, it's of course I have to be there to, encourage the kids, because it's not easy for them. This is becoming more and more
Yeah.
difficult for mine as well as other kids, where you're not as motivated anymore. you know
Yeah.
it's about keeping them
Right, right.
motivated and encourage them that, this will be okay. So it seemed all exciting for the first week or two. Yeah, this is cool. I can be at home and I don't have to get
Online
up and
learning,
put my
right.
uniform on to go out. But we've got way past that, and now I think it's affecting my kids as well as all the other kids that I know in many different ways.
Yeah.
So they're having a tough time.
Could you talk about some of those ways that you feel like it's affecting them?
So uh, the funny thing is, with a lot of kids that were not thriving in that school setup, are doing pretty good in this, because they don't have any of those distractions or anything like that. They can concentrate a lot more. But the majority of kids are missing the interaction, missing chit-chatting, with their friends, with their peers, with their teachers, just being out. And unfortunately, we've had, I mean, if you want to say fortunately as well, we've had a pretty serious lockdown. So most kids have
Yeah.
probably not ventured out in the past, I would say, let's say 2 months now. It's been about two
Yeah.
months.
Can you talk a
So,
little bit about that lockdown? Because I think a lot of people aren't familiar with the lockdown in the UAE.
so when we initially started the lockdown was, they were talking about social distancing, people staying indoors, and they started off with small hours in the day where they were doing this sterilization kind of service around the whole of the UAE, well, Dubai at least, and where they were going and sanitizing literal streets and stuff. So they would have a small number of hours where you weren't allowed out, curfew set hours, which was fine because it was usually through the night. And that slowly increased to, it became a 24-hour one. For about 2 weeks, it was 24 hours. So you were literally not, and if you wanted to go outside, you had to apply for a permit, which was, you had to put a lot of details in, explain exactly when, how long you will be out for, where you will be visiting from where, and it was only for supermarket or any medical reason, any kind of emergency. Apart from that, you weren't. There are heavy fines for being out in those times. There were heavy fines for being out in those times. And nobody did, to be honest. Everybody seemed to be pretty good about it, stayed indoors, and I think it's worked well. They did this because they don't want numbers increasing like they have been around,
Right.
trying to keep them as possible. So the government, as much at the time you think, this is real hardcore. Do we really need to be doing this? They did it to protect their citizens, the residents, the expat community here. And
Right.
at least for myself, if I can speak for myself, I really appreciate that.
Yeah. And I mean, again, going back to the UAE responding, I mean, I definitely think they were one of the first responders. They did it really early on. And even flights were grounded very early on, right? That's something that, I know that your husband was stuck in a different country and you haven't seen him in, 3 months now because flights are grounded and no one can
Yeah,
go in or
beginning
out.
of
And so,
Feb. Yeah.
yeah.
So
So can you
yeah,
just
it's
talk a little bit
unfortunate
about,
that it is that way. It's unfortunate that it is that way, that people are. And there are many, many residents like my husband who are stuck outside, but there are reasons for what they're, not bringing anyone in. And it is the right way. As much as we don't like it right now, that is
right,
the way we're going to kind of protect where they are and where we are right now.
right,
So
right.
if you can stay put for a little longer, I'm sure things will start to move in a positive
A little
direction.
bit better.
And
Yeah, and Dubai's numbers have been, I mean, the UAE's numbers have been fairly low. So I think, if there's anything to say for the way they've responded, then that it does work.
it is working. I mean, we have high numbers at the moment for a small country that we are, but I can say that because they are testing literally everyone. They're going into and doing, in some areas where they've had a higher number of cases, they're going to do door-to-door testing,
Oh,
which
wow.
is why some of our numbers seem to be a little bit higher for such a small country.
Yeah,
But that is, if you've been unwell, you go in and they will test you. You won't have to prove I've got this, and
right,
wait till
right.
to get tested.
That's
So I
true.
think that's why we have, a lot of people would say we have a high number at the moment. That doesn't seem to be going down, but
Right, yeah.
I believe that's one of the reasons.
Right. So just going back to your students and working as a teacher, we have a question here. Do you have concerns about children not in a safe environment at home?
I do. We have our counselors all on board to try and help out in those. I can't speak too much about those things, but we do have a lot of our counseling department that are on board wherever we're finding any small kind of issues we feel like that need to be addressed. And obviously we can't be right there too. We involve them straight away. And so that has been, in the best way we can, is trying to be taken care of. So
Yeah.
I do want, go ahead.
And I was gonna say, and without going into detail, so like, let's say, you do have a concern and you want to involve a counselor, like obviously it's distance. So how does the involvement of the counselor work?
Sorry, can you just say that again? It completely
Yeah, sure.
there.
So I was saying that, not obviously not going into any details of like specific cases, but you mentioned that you guys involve counselors if there is a concern. So, can you walk us through an example situation with getting the counselors involved? I mean, it is distance learning, right? So it's not like
It is, but they
parents
have
are still controlling. Yeah, go ahead.
parents are, but there is a step-by-step process that the counselors can go through. Again, I can't talk too much about it, that they do follow
They do
through.
have.
And if we have to get anyone else involved, they do get the authorities involved if it's needed,
If it gets to that. We have
Yeah.
another question. So how do you enforce academic integrity when it comes to taking tests and exams online?
Oh, that's been a difficult one. I mean, we've put it out there and try to educate the kids on this as much as we can. It's difficult in this kind of situation. What do you do? But at the same time, when tests are taking place, this is just from some of my kids I've seen. They're asked to move to a different space in their room, and they're supposed to be all online. We have to have all our cameras on. No cameras are ever to be off. A lot of the questions then we try our best that they're kind of like open-ended, if you know, when they're setting
Yeah.
tests and sorry. Yeah. I work particularly in the humanities with social studies and English, so I can speak for those departments at least. You know, we use a lot
Sure.
of multiple choice. We'll use a lot of multiple choice. And we try our best being online to see that, okay, there's a few teachers there to see everything's going okay. But
Yeah.
you can't completely, you know, say that kids aren't going to do this. But
Right.
we
Right.
know them.
I mean,
We know the
and
ones.
kids
We
nowadays
know
are
them
so
pretty.
smart. Like, yeah, kids are
We've
so
had
smart.
some
They'll
really
find a
interesting
way.
ones in these videos where some of them want to sleep in and they put like pictures of themselves up and, you know, but they figured it out and we figured it out as well. So it took us some different ways to tweak different things to figure out who's
To
doing
tweak
what.
it.
But
Yeah.
you know, it's their loss at the end. A lot of them understand, at least in the middle school, a lot of them are getting this, that this is their loss. If they're not going to be honest about it, it's not anyone else's loss but theirs, you know.
It's
A lot
theirs.
of them are
Yeah.
moving out of
And
eighth
then
grade
as
and
far
going
as the
up to high
parents,
school. Go ahead.
yeah, that's true. I was saying a lot of the parents are also being affected by this, right? Like some parents who maybe had full-time jobs, now they've got a full-time job plus doing helping with distance learning. So how have you seen parents being affected, and is the Dubai American Academy doing, providing any resources to help the parents?
It's we have just parents are having a rough time. They are going to have a difficult time regardless. Like I said, with older kids, it's definitely a little bit easier because they're a bit more independent. But if you have a few older kids and you have got a few younger ones and you are working full time, it's going to be very, very, very tough. And teachers and parents are working as much as they can together to be as supportive of one another as they can. Parents
Sure.
completely
Yeah.
realize that teachers are giving it their more than their 100%. They are working way, way over time and giving it the best there. I've spoken to some teachers who said they have never worked this hard in their life, and these are teachers who've had like over 25 years experience. They've never had to work the
Wow.
way they have. So there are those, and then there are a lot of the teachers are completely understanding of the fact that, you know, some kids are going to have rough days. Parents are going to have rough days where parents can't support their kids in the same way. So if they're having a
Yeah.
rough day, let us know. You know, if kids can't make it to a lesson for whatever reason, that's okay, you know. So we're trying
Right.
to work as a team the best we can in supporting the education of their children. We know that it's really tough. It's tough for
Yeah.
everyone. It's something, this is so new to all of us. There is no one even who in education who's been there for like over 30 years who's ever had to deal with
Where this
anything
is
like
happening.
this. So we're all in the
Right.
same boat, you know, but it's best to
Right.
work at it as a team and involve who we can to support parents, to support
Yeah.
kids the best we can.
That you can. So we've gotten a question in a few different forms from various parents who are saying what can they do to manage and to motivate their kids to get work done? Because obviously when you're at school, it's a different environment. When you're at home, like, I mean, it's the same with us when we're working from home. Like the motivation is so low compared to when you're
Yeah.
actually in the office, right? So same thing with the kids. So these parents are asking, what can we do to motivate, and how can we manage and balance, school and home?
Well, one of the things that I can speak for our school that we did, we did a lot of surveys. Like after every week, we would do student surveys and parental surveys to see what's working and what's not. So,
Okay.
and again, I'm speaking from our school's point of view. We decided to move those 90 blocks. It was not happening, right? Being on a screen for 90 blocks and moving into the next one for a 90 block. We moved those down to 80 minutes, and then we would have a 10-minute break. So we made our breaks a little bit longer. They decided to move elementary, middle, and high schools' lunch times at the same time for everyone. So if you had different kids in different divisions in the school, you would all be able to have lunch at one time together.
Okay.
We've luckily
That's
come to Ramadan and our hours are even shorter now. So we have just a 50-minute block. So we
oh,
would
wow.
have, let's say, 20 to 25 minutes of a live class and the rest you can be doing, but there are breaks in between. So they're completely shortened.
Hmm.
We still have a lunch hour and we finish. So it's just a 5-hour day. And that's because we're working on Ramadan timings. But I think that's helped. That has totally helped us balance where kids can have that off-screen time uh, and, you know, have
Right.
time to spend with families and do the things that they do. I mean, there's not, unfortunately, we can't really get outside to parks at the moment, even with kids, because kids are not allowed to still be out. So, you know, being at home, trying to motivate for myself, again, I have the older kids. So we did everything from baking to making movie lists to just doing gardening, looking for jobs around the house that we could probably do as a family
Right.
that would get you away from the screen and get you away from just the academic side of things, right?
Yeah.
We've been lucky, we live in a compound, so we've tried to do as many walks as possible, but it hasn't been that easy. Again, lack of
Yeah.
motivation for the
Sure.
kids. But we try. Are there anything else I can,
Yeah. So,
is there any
can you
support
clarify
teachers? Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. Um, so I was going to say there's a question. Can you clarify children with special needs in middle school? Like, what does that mean?
Special needs, I'm talking about special educational needs from kids that have are on the spectrum of autism, maybe dyslexia, ADHD, dysgraphia. You know, there's different educational needs that you have different needs. So some different things work for different kids. Um,
Hmm.
I generally work with a lot of those, you know, that have those issues, and I know about their cases, thankfully.
Yeah.
So I know what's going to work for them and what not. And, you know, maybe I definitely need to be having a one-on-one, giving them this much time for
Sure.
this. So,
Okay. That makes sense. And then do you know if any of these students that may require, therapies in school are still receiving those therapies virtually?
outside school, yes. Some of
Okay.
the centers that they are. They're
There.
in the circumstances, everyone, and I think, is trying their very, very, it's not going to be the same, we all know that,
Right.
right? But they're trying their very, very best in what they can, in if they've got to send things over for therapy, material resources, they've been able to do that.
Yeah, that's great. It's nice to see that everyone's kind of like taking their role and trying to do it in a virtual way or in a way where everyone is still playing their part as much as
Absolutely.
they can. So
Yeah.
another question is there any support for teachers who are working so hard and at the same time are going through the same emotions that everyone else is?
So we have, again, a great counseling department, and I know that they've been pretty active in this because we have many teachers that are, you know, teachers on international assignments here. They're on their own, no families. A lot of them had planned to travel through the spring break and were unable to do that. So it can be hard on you, right? I still
Yeah.
have my kids, and it's still hard on me at times. You know,
Right.
you got to learn and school has been very supportive in saying in our lunch blocks, for example, we are to be away from any emails, like away from our computers completely.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
That's good.
so we still try to plan to have our weekly meetings with our divisions. You know,
Hmm.
try and do like fun little activities to make things like quizzes for teachers, get
Right.
together to have Zoom meets, Google meets. Um, but I do know, again, like I said, it's been very tough on a lot of
It's been
teaching.
rough. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure. And then you mentioned earlier that, you know, with DAA, the Dubai American Academy, a lot of the students have iPads, computers. Um, can you speak to children who maybe don't have access to iPads and computers and how those kids and families are managing? And maybe, you know, it's at other schools in Dubai, maybe even students at your own school?
Yeah, so it's been tough with a lot of other schools. I know that younger children are not provided with, you know, ours, at least from what I know, every single child has some kind of a gadget, you know, to be in touch with, and take their classes online. There are many schools where kids don't. You know, if you're a 5-year-old, for example,
Mhm.
you wouldn't have like a laptop or an iPad to
Right.
yourself. And maybe if you have one at home, if there's like 2, 3 kids, how are they supposed to all share that out? Again, the UAE government has taken, there are initiatives out there for if you do need, you know, their help, you reach out to them, and they've tried their best to help a lot of students out who have no access to technology,
Yeah.
and, you know, get something to them.
Yeah.
You know, there are great. So Etisalat, for example, our telecommunication provider, who I had a lovely meeting with
With
yesterday.
yesterday.
But anyway, I do know when I called up, for example, to try to speak to someone about the issues, there was a dedicated line. If you were having issues with your internet that was affecting your school learning, your distance learning,
Oh,
and
wow.
I think they would be onto that straight away and make amends for that.
That's great. And then we have a question here from from your husband. He says, "Do you wear makeup before starting your distance learning?"
You know, the nice thing is that I get up and yes, no, I don't sit in my pajamas. I absolutely don't. But I wake up, I get changed, and I look fairly presentable. Um, and yeah, I get on, but I don't put on a full face of makeup at home. I don't.
Yeah.
Thank you, husband, for asking such an awesome question.
And then kind of the last question to sort of tie everything together, you know, obviously you've been doing this now for about 2-ish months, a little over 2 months. What would you do or what would you recommend to be done differently had you known then in the beginning what you know now?
Oh, that's a difficult one.
Sorry, I'm putting you on the spot.
If we had known, that's okay. I'm just trying to think. I haven't really thought about that. You know, is there anything that we could have done beforehand? If I had known what, I think, to be honest, there wasn't much different that we could have done. At least, again, this is me speaking from the school that I'm at. I think other schools would have definitely thought, you know, we need to be a lot more technology savvy. But we are probably one of the top technology advanced schools in Dubai, thankfully, right? Which it
Yeah.
didn't make sense to me, to be honest. It didn't make sense to me. I was like, you know, everything seems to be about every child needs an iPad and everything seems to be online.
Yeah.
But
Now you're like,
that
makes
has
sense.
come into use now. Everybody, even kids were, right? Kids were, okay, they weren't as ready to be on a screen all the time. So if we could, maybe if we had, you know, known this before, we might have introduced that you were able to have, say, for example, Google Meets with teachers, you know, and so we were a little bit more like, okay, we could have a group that we could maybe meet up with. But being in a school where everyone's there, you don't really have the need to do that, right?
Right,
It's
right.
like to meet up and have this kind of conversation. So to be honest, being fair to the school on that, I think we had done everything. It was already set, ready, and this happened. You know,
Yeah.
of course, it was a bit of a shock to the system, and it took about a week or two to us to find our feet, balance it out, like for the kids, because it was very new for us and very new
Right.
for the kids. But
Yeah.
those surveys really helped. I think we
That's
got a
good.
lot of feedback from different things, what's happening. You know, some wanted them to be a little bit more interactive, the classes where we were spending more time, you know, being able to see our friends, being able to speak to the teacher. And, you know, we try and start off on a real casual note. What's everybody been up to? Is everything okay? Try to have that. We still have, there's a life skills class that every student has for about 40 minutes every
Okay.
day after lunch. And that's where it's like you're kind of easygoing, talking about different issues you have. They can be emotional issues, whatever you have. Everyone has their own teacher. There's probably about 13, 14 people in that class that you have. So I think that's where a lot of kids have been able to, you know, chit chat with friends, chit chat with teachers, just about, you know, casual things where it's not academic
That's
or
awesome. So
subject related.
kind of like homeroom, right? Like a homeroom type
It's yeah,
course.
it's kind
Like
of
in the
it's called
States, you have home.
transformation and in discovery. Yeah, it used to be a
Ooh,
homeroom. It used to be called life skills, and then it moved to transformation and in discovery is what it's T&D
so
is what we call
fancy.
it. So every child every day you have a half an hour T&D class, and that's
Yeah.
where I think a lot of the kids get out anything they need to get out. And you know, it's not
Yeah.
so structured. We've left that, so we're not working with you know, let's work on this today or let's work on this. It's very easy going.
Yeah. And just to clarify, the your school is a private school, correct? Like a private American
Uh,
school,
yeah, it
not a
is.
government
It's
public
a
school. Okay.
private,
Well,
no, it's not
that's
a
about all
public
the
school.
time that we have today, and we really appreciate you joining us. I know we had some technical issues yesterday, but we're glad that you were able to make it, and we had some great information. And for those of you who are still watching, you know, this is Saima from Dubai. She's a teacher at the Dubai American Academy, and we are just to give a little background on us. We're podcasts. But because we can't meet, because Navi and I, so my podcast co-host, we can't meet to record our next episode, we've actually been doing interviews twice a week of different people who are either affected by or, you know, are in their profession. Their profession has been affected by the COVID crisis. And so, you know, we had a couple of doctors, we had a health administrator, we had a teacher. Next week, we actually have the director of a domestic violence nonprofit because I don't know if our viewers know this, but domestic violence cases have actually increased significantly, especially in the South Asian community. So, you know, that's something, again, that no one's really talking about, but something we need to discuss. And if you don't follow us, it's Nonstop Chit Chai on Instagram. And, you know, it was great having you. We have a lot of people saying, this was great. Could have heard a lot more. Well done. So much respect for teachers. So thank you so much for joining
I have
us. We
my
really
son
appreciate
telling me
it.
I
And
love this talk.
so that made your day. It made it all worth it.
Yeah.
Oh man. All right. Cool. Well,
Alrighty,
thank you
guys.
so
Thank
much
you
for
so
joining
much for
us. And,
joining.
you know, thanks to everyone else. Take care.
Take care.
Bye.
Have a great one, everyone. Stay safe. Bye.